Hello my friends, it's the Game Boy Geek here. Hold your breath, because we're going underwater. We're going to deep water. We're going to be in submarines, submerged underwater in the darkness, hiding. Because us as submarines, the NATO troops, are going to be trying to take out Soviet bases. And at the same time, the Soviet base is going to be trying to take out those submarines in a hidden movement stealth action game. They come unseen. It's 2 to 5 players, hidden movement game, and it's designed by a former Navy commander, a submarine commander. Pretty cool. It's from Osprey Games. It's coming out here at Essen here 2015. Let me show you in general how it's played, and I'll see you on the other side. One player plays the NATO player, and they will be controlling 2 submarines behind this humongous hidden screen. And the other player gets to look at that screen, and it is huge, but it's a thing of beauty. The other player plays the Soviets on that same board, but a larger scale board that can be seen by both players, and they'll be moving ships and destroyers around there as well. The NATO or hidden player is trying to destroy 4 of these 6 stations. 4 of them will get randomly and secretly given to them at the beginning of the game, while the Soviet player is trying to destroy the other player's 2 submarines. So at the beginning, the submarine is going to draw 4 random cards off the deck. There's only 6 of them, and each of them is going to have one of these bases. And so in this game, Alpha, Delta, Echo, and Bravo are the 4 of the 6 bases that I'm trying to secretly destroy, and the other player doesn't know that these are the 4 I'm going after. Now, for the most part, your submarines are going to be on your board here. Once in a while, they'll pop up on the big board. I'll go over that in just a moment. But you have a green and a blue submarine, and you will have a blue and a green sort of control panel here that's called battery and surface depth. And so the main thing you'll be doing on your turn is moving. When you move, you can move any direction, including diagonal, and you can move up to a certain amount of spaces. Now, notice that on here, there's different depths. We have 250, we have 650, and we have 450, and you'll see that they're delineated there. When you're in 250, it's shallow water, and you can't go that fast. So in shallow water, you can only move up to 6 spots in that shallow water. Now, surface depth. You start at 0, and that's you're actually on the surface, which normally actually starts on the big board, but just for the camera here, we're going to start here. And anytime you move even 1 square, you can move up to 200 feet up or down in depth, but you always have to know that you can never go deeper than what this says. So right here, the deepest I can be is 200, because I can't go to 400 because that's deeper than 250. But once I get into the 650 range, I could go deeper. So my first, you can move up to 6 in the shallow water, so I could go 1, and for every place you move, I can move 200. So my first is 200, and now I would have taken this guy off the big board, placed him on here, and I am now, he cannot see me. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let's say I've moved my maximum of 6, and I would use 6 battery because it tells me how much battery I use for that move, and that's the most I can move there. Anytime you move through any shallow water space, even 1, the most you can move is 6, and I'm at the surface depth of 2. You would do that for both submarines. You're always using both of your submarines, and then the other player will play the NATO. So that's one of the main things you do is move. Now also note that the submarines and even the other ships I show you, they only take up 1 square. So this is all decorative, just the colored spot is where it's at. Now the other thing you could do is lay mines. Now this can only be done in shallow water, and what happens is he has to move his maximum of 6 spots, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I would take my battery down as I just showed you, and then the mines would be laid in the 5 spots just before he went, and it has to be in a straight line. Now, if these mines, if any of them hover over deeper water, they just don't do anything, but you gotta lay them in shallow water, 6 moves, and that's where they go. Those can help destroy the other ships. I'll show you that later. Let's say on a future turn, this guy went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. He would then put himself up on the big board. So here he'd put his ship there. He would pull out this card and say, yep, I just destroyed Alpha. Any opponent ships that are here would completely be destroyed and removed from the game. If there are any fuel or bomb tokens there, those would also get removed from the game. And we'll talk about what those do as well. And also, this always does a special ability and it's good for the submarines. So in this case, it destroys all the fuel containers at Ice Station Echo. So at the beginning, there's a lot of equipment here that they'll be moving to other bases and moving to their destroyer ships and stuff. But if there are any left over here, all those would have just been completely destroyed. Now the sub can't be hit or hurt here. On his next turn, he basically has to go over and come back out, and then he would go down to depth and be hidden again on his own little board. And anytime he destroys any of these, it's really going to do something bad for the other player. Fuel and weapon containers can never be reused, so they essentially sucks them drive resources. Destroy all fuel containers at Station Echo, we already saw that. And all fuel and weapon containers have reduced capacity, so they don't do as good for the other player. Now, as you can imagine, riding around doing these different things, your battery's going to get low and you have to recharge them. To recharge them, you have to get up to the surface level depth, or known as periscope depth, and they stick these pipes up and they refuel. Here's a picture of that from the actual history and strategy guide that comes with this. So how this works, now remember, in this you can only move 6 spots in the shallow water. You move 1, and that takes you down to 1 battery. If you have any less than 1 at this point, if you're at 0, essentially you actually put yourself on the big board, and you have to basically lay there, and you have to spend an entire next turn there, and they can come ram you and just destroy you. So you never want to go to 0 battery. So here I've moved 1, and basically as I moved 1, I've come up to the surface because I can move 201, and I would put my guy on the big board here, and notice that I can see really quickly that I am at T11. Now some people put the actual boat here. Some might just use this token. Some might use this token with the boat so they can see what color's actually going. And so let's do that. We have this, so he's up there. Now he has to move 2 in a straight line, and these 2 do not remove your battery because he's recharging. So you go 1, 2, and then he's gonna go back underwater, and he's gonna move up to 3 more squares secretly. So he's left that at T9. So this guy saw him come up, recharge here, and he's gone. So the other guy knows that the sub is within 3 spots away from that. Now if you remember, I went up there with 1 battery. When you recharge those 2 spots and it didn't use the battery while recharging, you get 10 battery life. And then again, I'm going to be moving up to 3. So I'm going to go 1, I'm going to go underwater. That would have brought it back from the big board down to here, my little board behind the shield. And let's just say I move 1 more and then 2 more. So I moved 1, 2, 3 total. And on my last one, I went down to 400 feet because now I'm in the 450 range. And that would have been it. Now, interesting to note that that takes 6 movements, which means if you're snorting in these shallow waters, it takes your entire turn. That's pretty much it for the subs. The Soviet team will be using these ships. There's 2 different types of ships. There's logistics, and then there are the destroyers, which are actually doing the attacking. The logistic ships, if they're in a base that has either fuel or bombs, they can load them. So all 3 ships start in this base. Essentially, when it's their turn, let's say you can move them in any order as well. Let's say I put 1 fuel and 1 bomb in the hold of container ship 2. And let's say I do that really for all 3 ships before they move. So all 3 of these guys are going to get some stuff, and they can start moving. Now, the container ships can move up to 14, and this supply ship can move up to 16. I'm not sure why they didn't put that movement here, because you kind of forget after a while. So this guy can move up to 14 and 16, and anytime one of those ships enters another base, they can either pick up stuff if they have room on their ship, or they can drop off stuff if they have it in their ship. So you're moving stuff around. They can also do what's called a RAS, or a RAS, which is replenish at sea, where they can come in contact with one of the destroyers and they can actually replenish it. So if this guy was here and he came up here, they can actually move these guys 4 in a straight line, 1, 2, 3, 4. And by doing that, they can now transfer anything that this ship had into the destroyer. So let's talk about what the destroyer has. Now the destroyers, you get 1 for each, a red and a yellow to show which one's which, and they have fuel and basically salvo, or their bombs that they have. And over the course of the game, they're going to be using these bombs and using some fuel. And what happens is, when we did that RAS, as you just saw, if, let's say, that container ship gave both of those, gave the bombs and the fuel to him, the fuel would go up 50, and the bombs would go up 2. So let's say he had that at 1, he would go up 2 to max strength, and then these would go back to the Echo base, assuming it's still alive. That's refueling in the RAS. Now the destroyers themselves could actually go into a base that has these and refuel and rebomb, get more bombs that way as well, but this is a way to do it on the fly. So let's talk about hunting. Now as you say, let's say this guy moves 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, he's moved 3, and now he's going to do a sonar search. Basically, he takes these sonars and he puts it right, this black line lines up with the front of his boat. Sorry, it goes like this. Now notice that this is going to be looking for sonar. Now he will ask the other player if he can be seen. And if the other player on his hidden board is here, let's say he's in one of these spots, he would say contact red. Let's say he had 2 ships, he'd say contact red, contact green. And at that point, if there is a contact, this person gets to attack. If there's no contact, this player can continue to move, which I'll show you later. In this case, let's assume that he just attacked. Now, this little part here is not seen by a sonar, so the sub could be sitting right underneath here and not be seen. Let's say it says contact red. He gets 2 sets of 3 bombs to lay on any of the squares on any way he sees fit. So let's say he does that, and let's say he goes like that and like that. And he's going to tell him which depth each one's at. So he's going to say, let's say black's at 400 and white's at 200. Those are the depths that those are hit at. The other person would look to see if he's in one of these spots. If he's in one of these spots and it was 400, because black was 400, he would say hit. If he was here and he was within 200 feet of this, so if I said black 400 and he was either at 200 or 600, in this case it's shallow water, so he could only be at 200, he would say near miss. So at least I know that I got the right spot, but it's not the right depth. So if they're within 200, it's a near miss on the same spot, or it's a direct hit if it's the right spot and the right depth. If it's a direct hit, he gets a hit icon, and this means that this sub, the blue one, the max depth he can go now is 400. He can't go to 600 anymore. If he gets hit a second time, he can only go to 200, and if he gets hit a third time, he's completely sunk. Now let's say the ship, it wasn't a direct hit, it was just a near miss. Well, you put the token on like this, he can still go through all the depth in this case, but if the next time he gets another near miss, that becomes a hit. Now that guy can now still continue to move. So let's say he moves 3 more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's say he did 5. And what he says, he can set up what's called a Sonar Watch. Same thing as the sonar search, but it's basically what happens is during the other player's turn, if he moves or incorporates any of his movements in one of these, he has to tell him contact color. It's the same as the search, except this guy can't react to it and attack right away. He can't react until his next turn. So you would take the total amount of movements that I moved, the 3 before, and however many I just moved there, and you would subtract the fuel. So let's say he moved a total of 8. He would go down 15 on fuel. Now, obviously, I just used a set of bombs, so it would go down to 2. That's sort of how you run those destroyers. A couple of things about damage is if one lost battery and came all the way up to the surface, this guy can literally just ram, and this guy's completely destroyed and out of the game. Earlier, I told you about these mines that are placed on the small board. This is the large board, but this is the small one. It would have gone on the small board, and maybe would have looked something like that. It looked a little different because the squares are small, but I want to show you how they trigger. Now let's say that the acoustic mines were there. I have the container ship and the destroyer ship. If the container ship, they make a lot of noise. So if they moved at least 6 spots that turn and moved over the mine, at the end of his turn, that player would say, oh, you just triggered the acoustic mine. If it's a container ship, boom, completely destroyed and out of the game. This guy can move, if he moves 8 squares and moves over the acoustic mine, he also gets hit, but he doesn't necessarily die, he just gets damage. And that guy would show both sets of damage here for both the engine and the weapons. And if he's damaged, the first thing you do is you lose 20 units of fuel, because it all leaks out. And you can only move a maximum of 6 squares, and you can never have more than 80 units of fuel. And you can't do any attacking or no sonars. So it hurts both your engine and moving and your weapons both at the same time. Now to fix this, you can go into a spot, and that does not count. He's in there. His next turn, he has to spend his whole turn in there and gets to remove one of these damage. Then on his next turn, he can move back out or spend an additional turn to get that out. And then on the next turn, move out again. And as you get this, you get your weapons back. And as you get this, you get your movement back. Now that's essentially it. There's a lot of details I sort of left out, but that gives you an overview of the game. There's also some advanced variants where you can play with weather, and it goes from west to east, and weather goes from through the way, and it causes all sorts of havoc depending on how bad the weather is, and it changes the strategies of the game. And so that's pretty much it. The guy, NATO, is going to be going hidden, trying to destroy 4 of the 6 objectives, and the Soviets are trying to destroy those 2 subs. Whoever does that first is the winner. All right, now you may have seen my top 10 most wanted or anticipated games from Essen. This made that list. This was number 4. I was super interested in this because I love hidden movement games. They're some of my favorite games. I love historic and thematic type games, and this has all that going for it. Plus, it's designed by a former submarine commander. Come on. Now, I did a review of a Spectre Ops, which is a new hidden movement game just a while back. And I went through sort of the history of hidden movement games and the different ones that came up through, back in the 80s all the way through just recently. And you can click on this thing right here and go I have it timed up right to that spot so you can hear that history, because I'm going to be referring to some of those games in this review. Now, about the game, let me just talk first about the components, the quality of the artwork, and things like that. It's amazingly done production-wise. The boards are awesome. The first board is huge. It takes up a huge part of the space. That shield is huge. That's the biggest shield I've ever seen in a hidden movement game. And when you're looking at it, as I showed you, it's really cool to look at. The components are good. Now the pictures. Now, it came on 2 different rule books. I didn't show you this, but one book is like 14 pages on 10 of those pages just on history. Talked about history of submarines, showed pictures of the designer working on an original board of this back in, I think, in the 70s. He's been working on this game for a long time. And, it showed all the history of submarines. I loved reading about that because it helped me understand the mechanics of the game better. So that really drew me into the theme of this game. Artwork's awesome. The components are awesome. Those gears, moving those things around, they're nice and sturdy. So component-wise, thematic-wise, everything here is great. Now, when we get into the gameplay, there's 1 or 2 things here. See, more of the new modern board games are coming out are starting to be more streamlined in general, and they're starting to take heavy games and streamline them down, but still giving you a dense experience. For me, I call that the depth to complexity ratio. A game that has a lot of depth but is not that complex is where people are aiming at. It is my sweet spot. Now, this game has a lot of thematic things to the game, obviously. It's not a simulation, but it is very thematic. It's before nuclear power, so the submarines have to come up, and they have to snort to gain batteries, and they have to go down. I mean, just all the things are really thematic. Some of the problems I have with the game is that there tend to be a lot of things to remember. How many spots things can move? How does the snorting move? And I also gotta say, the rule book, although it was written with a lot of detail, there's still a lot of things missing. It could have used a lot more examples. For example, someone posted 20 questions in one post on Board Game Geek. The designer amazingly responded to all of those questions. But interestingly enough, many of those questions are the same ones I had after I read the rule book. And how did that not get caught? How are there not examples of this? So the rulebook really needs to be better done with a lot of examples, even just knowing how to snort and gain batteries and which part of your movement uses battery, which doesn't, which does. That type of important things was not covered in the examples in the rulebook. We had to find out after the fact. There's a handful of examples of things like that. So I wish they would have done a better job doing examples in the rulebook when developing the final product here. There's a lot to keep track of here. Hey, those container ships can move 14, but one of those ships can move 16. Okay, well, why? Couldn't you have just streamlined it and made them both move 14 so it's easy? Yeah, maybe for strategy, those 2 extra spots really makes a difference. But when you're trying to keep track of so many things, it's just one more thing that could have been streamlined. Plus, there's nothing on the player aids that tell you how far these ships can move, because you're constantly referring back to the rulebook, and those types of bits and pieces weren't in the side margins. They're in blocks of text. There's a lot of those little, I would call them clunky, or some people would call them fiddly things about the game. Okay, I gotta move 6, I put the mines, okay, good. I'm doing sonar, did you move? No, I gotta move. So I gotta move, I'm gonna do a sonar watch. I've got to remember how many I moved, because after that I can continue to move and then set up a sonar watch for later on for the next turn. It's like, okay, well, how many did I move before? There's no way to keep track of that. I was using the weather thing to keep track of, or the lines on the board to keep track of how many I moved. So there's just a little bit of fiddliness here. Now, overall, the game's great. I would have liked to have seen a more streamlined version of this, because I think the idea is great. I think coming from a submarine commander is awesome. There's lots of parts about this game I liked. I just think it could have been even more excitable and enjoyable if it was more streamlined. Like, take, for example, the Spectre Ops game that I just reviewed, right? Letters from Whitechapel and Spectre Ops are both longer games, just like this. This takes 90 minutes minimum, probably 2 hours, maybe even more than 2 hours. So like 90 to 2 hours maybe average. That's a long game in today's days. Whitechapel takes about the same length. Spectre Ops maybe a little bit less than that. But you know what? They're streamlined to the point where there's a lot of depth as much as this, but it flows better. And the actions, everything just flows and fits together. With this, even after you've played a few times, you're still going to be constantly trying to check things. It's harder to teach. Now, if you're coming from a wargamer background and you're used to looking up tables and checking things and having a lot of little things for each movement and remembering all those things, and you like the theme, this might be your favorite game of hidden movement. So you'll want to check this out. But if you're looking for that more streamlined but yet a lot of depth, other games have done this genre better. And it's unfortunate because I really wanted to absolutely love this game. I wanted this to be like the new hit of hidden movement. But, Spectre Ops just came out. That's quite amazing. It's going to be hard to take that one down. Whitechapel's still my favorite. It's going to be almost impossible to take that one down. So in the hidden movement market, if you like thematic games, if you like historic, still give this one a try. But you might want to try it before you buy it because there's definitely hard to get through the rules, hard to get through examples, clunkiness, fiddliness. But if you can get past that, there's a good game here. But still, it's not quite as edge on your seat and quite as crazy, and quite as that amazing feeling you have when you're getting chased in Spectre Ops or Whitechapel. Although I will say it's quite balanced. It will often come down to just the last turn here. Overall, I just wish I liked it better. Not a bad game, but I think it could have been fantastic, and it just missed. That's They Come Unseen.